you today?
Welcome back to IPL Radio
Thank you.
and My
Thank you.
Generation.
It's great to be here again.
It's been a while.
It's been.
Now, a little while ago, you were telling me that you have been in the education business for 30 years. That is unbelievable.
Just about, yes. I first started teaching in 1994 and obviously studied for a few years prior to that, pracs in schools, if you count those as well. So it has been a while. We've seen a lot of change over the last 3 decades in education, that's for sure.
I bet you have. And even more if you went back to when I went to school. But we won't go into that. Yeah. So what are some of the cultural changes that you've observed in those 30 years?
Yeah, look, there's been a lot. And I think looking back to very early on for myself, we started prac teaching. There was no photocopier. So some of you might remember the days where we had the purple rollers and we had to handwrite masters and put them through this purple roller that created a lot of ink.
The Stetner machine.
Yes, that's right. So we had those, no computers, no telephones, obviously no internet.
Yes.
Everything was done by hand, but it created a beautiful slow culture where the pace was a lot more balanced in many ways with young children, and we had time, and the pressure was different to what it is today. Expectations have changed since then.
Yes, it is. I find it amazing how expectations in a lot of areas have changed, and mobile phones are largely responsible for this. But I can recall when I was working, we had and computers had just come in, we had a structural design package, and you could type in all your parameters, and you'd go away, and at the end of the day you'd come back and you'd have an answer, and you'd sort of make adjustments, and you'd put it through, and you wait another day. And then there's the second generation of computers. It would only take 2 hours, which was, this was fantastic. And then it got down to only having to wait a minute or two. When you had to wait a minute or two, it was amazing how frustrated you got having to wait.
That's right.
Because when you've got to wait all day, you go away and do other things. When you've only got to wait a couple of minutes, it's frustrating.
The minutes seem like a long time, don't they?
That's right. And telephones have sort of had the same effect.
Yes.
In olden days, you rang someone. If they weren't there, you just rang them again later. But now we expect people to be there at our beck and call almost.
That's right. It's in many ways sort of an instant answer society.
Yes.
And in education, it's become a little bit like that. What's the instant answer? It's become quite common to say, I'll just Google it. I'll just have a research, whereas we used to go through to the library and look up library cards, go find a book, do some photocopying, and then have to read a few different articles and come back together with an opinion on something. So it took time to find answers. And initially, even when I was at university, we didn't have computers, so all our assignments were handwritten, and we weren't even allowed to quote the internet as being a source of truth. So our assignments had to be all from research papers that we found in the library. So the resource was not seen as the internet was not seen as a credible source of truth back then. So that has changed a lot.
Yes, well, probably still can't be a source of truth.
Yes, you're right. We don't base certain opinions on some things that we see on the internet for sure. We do have to be wise. And that's part of the journey, I think, that we need to help our students to become wise in making these decisions, to be able to critically evaluate information that they see and hear that is readily available at their fingertips, to have a base of truth of knowledge, to know, is this reliable? Is this truthful? Is it something that I can put my opinion to or my weight to? And to be able to be those critical thinkers and make knowledgeable assessments and judgments is an incredibly important skill that our students must learn.
So where do you send students to sort of research the truth of the internet?
That's a skill that we try to teach in school, but I think we've become more aware that education is a partnership between families and carers and the school as well, and that support for understanding of how to critically evaluate something has to come from everyone in that space. And of course, everybody is allowed to have a different opinion on things, and to have a healthy debate about something is a really important skill as well, to say, well, this is what I've heard, this is what I've seen, what do you think? Where do we both sit in that?
Just probably taking it a little bit offline a little bit. there is talk at the moment of the federal government instituting if you like, a censorship of what is on the internet and whether it's misinformation or whether it's not. Have you sort of looked at this at all?
Not me personally.
No.
It hasn't impacted schools. I think what's important for us at schools is that we have our firewalls and things to protect our students from accessing materials that they shouldn't. But other than that, what they research at home is really up to their families and that point of view. But I haven't looked into that myself.
So computers now and the internet are an integral part of education now?
I think it can depend. It's a certain balance. It's a fine balance. We don't want to be oversubscribed to those materials and those sources of information, and to have, I think there's been a cultural shift back to more hands-on learning. So you will find that a lot of families are looking for schools that operate in outdoor areas. We have outdoor play, hands-on learning, learning through inquiry and discovery, and developing those critical thinking skills rather than being fed a quick answer straight away and accepting it as truth is part of the shift that has happened, which has actually been a good shift, I think.
I remember when my children were small, I think I got this from my father. He was very, he was I think he was anti-American, but we only had sort of American encyclopedias at the time. And I sort of think I picked up this sort of anti-encyclopedia thing from my father. And very often you'd have encyclopedia sales people coming around and wanting to flog you a set of encyclopedias.
Yes, that's right.
I'll go down to the library. Not. But the funny thing was, on one occasion I was working out the front and a lady came along and said, is anyone from the... she didn't mention the word encyclopedia. And I said, no. I said, go and have a talk to my wife. And anyway, about an hour later, she's still in there, and I thought, oh, what's going on here? So
she's
I went
buying
in there.
all of them.
Anyway, this woman was selling World Book encyclopedias. And she sort of spent a lot of time sort of showing them to us and what they do and that sort of thing. And I said, look, come back and we'll have a talk about it. And so when she left, my wife and I had a talk, and we decided, well, perhaps it's probably not a bad idea. Our kids are sort of about 8 or 9, and they probably should have some reference material that they don't have to go down to the library for. And this woman came back and we said, you know, we're going to buy them. And she was there till 10 o'clock just showing us what you can, how to use these encyclopedias. Wow. And one of the great things about them was when you were looking for something, that very often you'd find something else that you weren't looking for. And they referred to it as incidental learning.
Yes.
And I found this true for myself because we'd be sitting down watching TV and something would come up and I'd grab a volume of the encyclopedia and you sort of flick through it. And you do sort of learn a lot more than if you sort of type something on a computer and it comes up and all you get is what you've asked for.
Yes, absolutely.
Whereas with the old encyclopedias, you did have that incidental learning.
That's right. It's a bit
but I don't know whether they still have encyclopedias, do they?
Well, sometimes we do. They do still exist. A lot of the information is outdated, but you're right, that incidental learning, which can come through inquiry and questioning, which is what we're really encouraging particularly in the early years at the moment, and leading to those critical thinking skills, that's where that incidental learning comes in, and it's so valuable It also allows students to connect their prior knowledge, so things that they've experienced at other places, connecting that to what they're hearing in the classroom and connecting that to what they're experiencing at home or at a sporting club, for example, helps to create that wealth of information and that big picture view of things.
So, sort of without digressing, years ago, this is before internet, before computers, I had a cousin who was teaching in Japan, and he was telling us that he had to devise a program for the curriculum on thinking, how, to teach students how to think.
Yes.
And I thought this was most bizarre, but I guess it really is an essential thing for students to learn how to think and to reason their arguments and balance one set of information against another.
Absolutely. It's very important because we can research lots of different skills and we can research factual information, but to be able to evaluate that is really important.
Big no-no on the radio, having the phone ring.
I'm just glad it wasn't mine.
Well, the funny thing is that because at night time I actually switch my phone off. And when I turn it on in the morning, it's still on. It remains on silent.
Yes.
And sort of halfway through the day, my wife will say, "Is that your phone ringing?" I don't think so.
It does that, isn't it? And that's that instantaneous information, isn't it? That comes through us all night long. You know, we put our phones on silent so that we can sleep and they don't ping all night. But
oh gosh, that is
it is definitely,
definitely. But we are a society, or we've become a society who want everything now.
Yes.
We're not prepared to wait for it. I know when my wife and I we've been married just over 50 years now, and when we got married, you sort of didn't buy the flashiest house on the street. Your furniture was often secondhand, but sort of over a period of time, people have come to sort of want everything now.
Early on, that's definitely been a change.
And pay later.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's some really interesting videos on YouTube where they that ability to put something off or to wait for it when they pop a lolly in front of a child.
Oh, yes.
And then they say, if you leave that lolly and I walk out of the room, when I come back, you can have 2 or 3. And they video and they short clip all the children, and some of them will instantly grab it and eat it. Some of them will wait. Others will look around and their hand will be tempted. It's a very tempting video. It's a very tempting task for a young child, but it's an interesting, that delayed gratification, so to speak. Or
delayed gratification. I remember Phil Baker talking about delayed gratification, and it's something that we've lost, I think, in the process of time.
Yes, being able to get everything instantly, that delayed gratification is important. It's a skill, and along with resilience as well, it's really important to develop those. And I think we can have the opportunity for young people to develop those through, they might have a sporting club or things like that, where you have to work towards a goal. So working with team to develop the team and the skills to be able to perform well on the weekend competition, you're getting that resilience, that delayed gratification, the patience and the opportunity to build up skills over time rather than instantly going in and being, the winner, so to speak, straight away.
So as an educator, are you sort of required to develop programs to give children develop these skills in children?
There are programs around there that you can buy and implement in schools, but it comes down to good pedagogy, which is good teaching and learning practice, and that's a big part of that shift where while we're still allowing students to access information, facilitating learning on content, we are more focused on facilitating the opportunity for them to learn how to learn, learn the skills of resilience, patience, critical thinking, collaboration, all the things that go along with working as a team, and working over things over time to work problem solving. That's a big one. So creating opportunities where they can learn the things that they need to learn as well as develop those skills at once is good practice. It takes time and it takes skill for teachers to do that.
Do you find that in the education in schools that you're battling against the ideas and the things that children are learning outside of school, which sort of really are contradictory to the things that you're trying to teach them?
Look, that's a great question. And in many ways, that comes back to culture. So I think of it as society is made up of a whole lot of different microcultures. So your sports club will have a culture. The way the shopping centre that you attend regularly has a bit of a culture. And it's becoming aware of those cultures. Even every individual family has its own culture, whether it's traditions or their daily routine is quite a culture as well. We come home, we pat the dog, we take the dog for a walk, or we come home, we go out, we exercise, or we come home and sit in front of the TV. Neither is right or wrong. It's just that culture or that microculture. And so in a school, when you're looking at a classroom of 30 odd students and they're all coming together and they've all got their own microcultures in their own home, then they might have their microculture, whether it be from church or sport or their friends down the street. You might have one child that, like myself growing up, you would get on your bike at sunrise, ride off, play all day, come back as the street lights came on, and another child who is more indoors and online gaming. And you've got some very different cultures of 30 different students coming together in a classroom. The challenge of the teacher is then to create a culture of that classroom where everyone is still belonging and being a part of that and contributing well, and it's a respectful culture. So it's interesting if you were to visit many classrooms, and each one has a different feel, and that feel when you walk in it is the culture of that classroom. It's like a flavour, and that is all those individuals coming together, bringing those different experiences and those different values and creating one group where together they're all equally valued, they can all participate, all their strengths shine, and they all have opportunity to grow. So that in itself is quite a challenge.
Now, you're a head teacher. How difficult is it to get all the teachers under your I was going to say control, but that's not the right word.
Working relationships.
Yeah. How do you find it difficult to get them all on the same page?
Look, that's a good balance. It's not something that I actually find difficult, which is great. For me, it's about relationship. So you're building relationship with people. And I always say to staff, I'm looking for the gold in you. I want to see the things that you shine at, the things that you're passionate about, the things that you want to grow in, and task you to those areas. Because if we can find, because every individual's different, and if we can respect that and find those things, task them to those things that they're good at and they're passionate about, they will grow in that. So in respecting them and getting to know them. And we put people first before we do the paperwork. So how are they doing? What's going on for you today? How's your class going? How can I help you? That all comes before well, this is what we need you to do. This is what's important. So again, it's creating a culture amongst team and staff, a bit like the teacher creates that culture in their classroom. And when everybody's working together and it's about serving each other, it's about servant relationships in the workplace and getting along, valuing each other and saying, look, do you know what? You are fantastic at that. That's something I'm not so great at. Can you help me? I want to learn how to do that more like you do. And then offering in return. That's what's valuable.
Right. So the culture in a school largely comes down to the culture that the principal sets.
I think so, yes. And as a leader, if they're a visible leader, they're shown that they're valuing people, that's incredibly important. And then accepting the community members, because a big part of the culture also comes from the families and students that are there and incorporating that. So you might find a school's a particularly sporty school. Therefore, in many senses, like attracts like. If you've got a big sports program, more sporty children will be attracted to that. Same as academics. And that's where I say if you're looking at each school, each classroom has its own flavour, each school has its own flavour, and that's good too.
Well, yeah, I often think that it must be very difficult to be a teacher in this day and age when respect has diminished and discipline has diminished. Is that something? Are these issues that you deal with on a daily basis, or is your school sort of exempt from these sort of issues?
Look, I think schools everywhere are having the same challenges, but also the same rewards that are going around. And, that has changed as well. So in the past, I remember when I started, it was not long after that corporal punishment in schools was no longer going ahead,
Yeah.
but some schools did even have it. So that's been a big change in understanding of how we work with children to bring out the best in them. And that's been a good thing. It's certainly a journey that we're going on, and we have to be flexible, and we all have to still be those lifelong learners and willing to evaluate what we're doing. Really important is that critical reflection. So for myself, I never expect staff to be perfect. I always say we are on a working journey. We have working documents. We are growing. And as long as we're reflective and we can look back and say, look, that was fantastic. I'm going to do it again, but I'm going to do it slightly differently because the students coming in are slightly different. So we're always making it adaptations and growing and learning. So a little bit like you take your grandma's favourite cake recipe and you might make it yours by adding a pinch of ginger or cinnamon or something like that to it, and it becomes yours, but it's still a family favourite recipe. So there is a lot of change. It's it can be a very rewarding. Even it's the way that new teachers now have to meet their new upcoming regulations. The word really, I suppose, is that they finish their university degree. They come in and they have to be signed off as being proficient teachers. And that's a whole process that can take a couple of years, which didn't exist a few years ago as well. So the training of teachers has become more intensive as well. So I think a lot of them look at that and go, it's not just a 4-year degree, it's more like 6. By the time you do your 4-year degree, you go into schools and you have to get signed off as being proficient. It's a lot of work for new teachers, and we have to be really careful to look after their well-being, not just their physical health, but their mental health, because it is a demanding profession when you've got 30 individuals all with their own personalities and backgrounds coming into one environment, and the workload has increased definitely.
Yep.
Expectations have increased, and so we have to find healthy balance in that to retain our staff. We know that across Australia there is a shortage in teachers. So how do we resolve that? How do we look after them, and how do we attract them to the profession? It's a big question.
Do you consider teaching to be a calling rather than a job?
Definitely. I think if you look at it as a job, you're not going to last in it a long time. There has to be that inner passion to want to work with young people and provide them with the opportunity for them to be their best. And it's that passion and that calling that draws out the very best in people and sustains them through the challenging times, the trying times, and the times when you're just plain exhausted because it's been a big year and you're term 4 and then heading into Christmas. So, thinking of it as a calling is incredibly important.
Well, I take my hat off to you. I don't think I would like to be a teacher in this day and age. As you say, you have to be called, I think, to do the job well.
Yes.
I think if you're just going to front up and go from 9 till 3:30, it's not going to work for you.
Yeah, it's very hard otherwise, definitely, but it's also very rewarding.
Yep. So thank you very much for coming in.
That's
and sharing with us, because it's been a bit of an eye-opener, and because things are changing rapidly all the time, so you need to be keeping up to date and obviously going on courses and professional development and all this sort of thing on a regular basis.
Definitely. And look, that's something that I love doing, and I really always encourage staff to do. The more professional development you can do, the better. And we need to be forever learning. And it's stimulating. You walk away. If you can go away for a couple of hours and learn something from somebody and come back and implement that and do it well, then that's a win. So it's certainly a valuable thing to do.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Laurel, for
Thanks,
joining us.
Alan.
We're just going to close off now with Bill Haley, and